Good morning and welcome everybody to part 2 of a 3-part webinar series where we will be discussing how to establish a pooled trust. We're going to provide some step-by-step instructions that help you understand what is required to join one of our community trust programs. Before we jump in, just a reminder, we have everyone muted. Chat is disabled. We have a lot of people on the line, so please do put any questions that you have into the Q&A, and we'll reserve some time at the end to go through those questions. We have enabled closed captioning, so please turn that on your end if you'd like closed captioning. And as always, a link to the materials will be sent by email tomorrow. You should receive an email about 1 day prior to the event or following the event. And we will also have a recording of the webinar available on our website for anyone that may not have been able to join, or if you want to circle back and watch it again later. You will also be prompted to complete a brief survey following today's training. We ask that you please take a few minutes to do that so that we can get feedback on today's session. And as a reminder, as always, this presentation is for educational purposes only, and some of this information may change in the future, so keep that in mind if you're watching the recording at a later date. Now, in part 1 of this series, we gave you guys a detailed overview of NYSARC's Community Trust programs. We spoke about a little bit of our background, our history as a nonprofit that administers supplemental needs trusts and primarily pooled trusts. We offer a variety of first-party trusts, which are funded with a person's own money. And we also have third-party trusts that we manage when a parent, family member, or any interested third party would like to leave money to a loved one in a way that it won't jeopardize their financial eligibility for means-tested government benefits. Now, each of our programs has slightly different structure to it. Depends on who's funding the account, whether it's going to be a first party or a third party, and how much you need to open the account is going to be based on the type of trust. So the majority of our first party trusts, you need to start and open with a minimum of $300. We also have another first party trust that's for larger sums of money. That can be for things like an inheritance, proceeds from a settlement, and that trust requires a minimum opening deposit of $250,000. And then our third party trusts, they have different minimum balance requirements as well, as you can see here on the screen. For the purposes of today's training, we are going to focus on our Community Trust 1 and 2 programs, as those are the most frequently used programs. And so when we reference the minimum required funding, we'll generally be referencing that dollar amount. So we encourage you, as you are looking at setting up other types of trusts with us, refer to the current fee schedule for that particular trust for information about the minimum funding requirements, as well as the costs to establish those accounts. Now, one of the great benefits of using a pooled trust, and particularly a NYSARC Community Trust, is that they are quick and easy to establish. And that's because the documents for these trusts have already been drafted. An attorney doesn't have to draft a document and submit that to Medicaid or Social Security Administration for approval. NYSARC Community Trust programs are governed by one master trust, and then there is a joinder agreement where you apply to join the program. These documents have already been approved by Medicaid and the Social Security Administration. So you can get started with a NYSARC Community Trust with as little as $300. That means that this is a great fit if somebody is receiving a nominal amount of money, or if they need to open a trust very quickly and get money out of their name because they've been holding on to it. Typically, when you receive funds, this is something we covered in last month's training, the money that you receive is income to you in the month that you receive it. And if you're already getting benefits, you generally need to spend that down before it becomes an available resource in the following month. When you deposit the funds to open up the account, you can either open with the minimum of $300, or if you know what your Medicaid spend down is going to be, or if you're opening with a lump sum, you simply open with that initial deposit as long as it's greater than $300. We will deduct out of your initial deposit a one-time non-refundable enrollment fee of $200, and you'll be charged your first month's administrative fee. For individuals that are putting a lump sum of assets into the trust, we'll typically deduct that right out of that amount or out of your spend down deposit. If you are making monthly deposits into the trust to meet a Medicaid spend down, we do ask that you keep at least a minimum of $100 in the account at all times. That allows us to protect our beneficiaries from overdrafting into others' accounts. And you're eligible for that if you are making monthly electronic deposits. If you're not sending in a recurring monthly electronic deposit, we'll ask that you keep at least 1 month's spend down in the account. So that's why it's a great option to use electronic deposits, can reduce what you need to have held in your account each month. And again, that only applies to people who are making monthly deposits. If you have put a lump sum in your trust, you do not have any minimum balance requirement. Now, before you get started setting up a pooled trust or a NYSARC Community Trust, if you're not already receiving Medicaid benefits, so if you're using the pooled trust to qualify for Medicaid services, you generally want to get started with your Medicaid application first. The reason for that is that the Medicaid application takes generally much longer than it will take for you to set up your pooled trust. Now, it is different in different areas around the state. Some counties want to see the pooled trust paperwork with your Medicaid application. So in some cases, you may be doing them at the same time. And certainly a lot of people will contact us and want to get information about how the pooled trust works before they move forward with applying for Medicaid. And so we're certainly available to assist with that, and provide as much information so that you can make your decision on whether or not you're looking to choose Medicaid services. For some of the individuals that we serve, and generally older adults who are looking to apply for Medicaid for home care services, they may need to also submit some paperwork with their local county to formally deem them disabled in order to use a pooled trust. That's a very important step. A person must have a qualifying disability in order to spend down funds in a supplemental needs trust or a pooled trust. This process is not typically necessary if the person is getting Social Security disability income or supplemental security income. Those are benefits where the individual already meets the Social Security definition for having a disability, and so you don't need to complete that paperwork with Medicaid. This is a very important step to make sure that you have the ability to spend down funds in a pooled trust, and that you won't have to do this later, which could delay a person's access to care. So definitely one thing to really be making sure whoever you're working with to assist you with your Medicaid application, that you identify whether or not you need to do that. Another thing that's very important is that you review the information and procedures document. These documents are available on our website. We also provide them to prospective beneficiaries prior to setting up an account. This is a document that explains a lot of information about how the trust is administered, and important details like how do you send funds to the trust? How do you submit requests to make payments? What are some things that are eligible for payment? What are some things that we can't pay for? These are very important procedures that you should review. We always encourage people to read this document, highlight anything you have questions on, and call us. We're happy to go over that with you. You should also work with a legal professional if you're able, and have them review the master trust. This is the legal document for the trust, as well as the fee schedule, so you have a full understanding of the cost of the program. If you or the person that you're working with who needs to set up a pooled trust is over the age of 65, it's important to consider whether or not they're receiving supplemental security income benefits. That's something that if you're over 65 and you put funds into a trust, you're receiving SSI, it's possible that the Social Security Administration may issue a transfer penalty. So it's important that you contact us if you're in that situation, and we're happy to go over that in more detail. I've also provided a resource in today's materials that talks about that. It's not often that the Social Security Administration actually takes action on these transfers, but it's important for you to understand that that is a possibility. Another thing to keep in mind for those individuals who may be older and may be going into a nursing home within 5 years of establishing this trust, it's important to understand that transfers to the trust do count towards that transfer penalty for nursing home care. Home care, as it stands right now, does not have a transfer penalty. So, and no look back period. And so transfers to the trust don't affect your eligibility for home care at this time. How it works if you go into a nursing home in the future is that the funds that have not been spent on your behalf in the trust might count as an available resource. So it's a very important that you get in touch with the pooled trust if you're planning to transition into a nursing home and will not be returning home. And we'd be happy to go over that with you and work with you to try and help you spend down the funds in your account. You will continue to be able to utilize the funds in your trust even when you're in a nursing home. The trust will only close upon the beneficiary's death. Now, the items that are currently required to set up a NYSARC Community Trust is completing the application to join the trust. That's called the joinder agreement. This is a document that needs to be signed and notarized by the beneficiary or the donor in the case of our third-party pooled trust. If a beneficiary is not able to establish the trust for themselves, someone with the legal authority can establish and fund on their behalf. And I'll talk more about that on the next slide. Then we need a copy of the beneficiary's Social Security card, the beneficiary's Social Security award letter, which is going to show us their benefits and any claim numbers. And you need to fund the trust with a minimum opening deposit. So typically that's going to be at least $300, but other trusts might have larger minimum and opening deposit requirements. And you can fund the trust by a one-time electronic deposit from your bank account or by a check. Now, these detailed instructions are available on our website. When you go to our homepage, there's a button in the top right-hand corner called Join the Trust. And we encourage you to use that as a resource. We update that as new information becomes available. So that can always be a helpful guide to you in setting up the trust. Now, if the beneficiary is not able to set up the trust on their own behalf, typically the individual can establish for themselves as long as they have the capacity to sign a legal document. And that allows the beneficiary, and in the case of a first-party trust, when it's being funded with the person's own money, that beneficiary is also considered the donor. When they have the capacity, they can sign the joinder agreement, have it notarized, and fund the trust themselves. But in some cases, our beneficiaries may not be able to sign on their own behalf. And in those instances, the joinder agreement can be established and signed by a legal guardian. Now, it's important if the guardian is planning to also be funding the account that the guardian must have guardianship over the person and the property. That's very important. Power of attorney can also establish on behalf of the beneficiary. That's probably the most common that we see. Oftentimes, an older adult that needs to set up a pooled trust for Medicaid eligibility will have their power of attorney establish it on their behalf. And if the individual doesn't have a legal guardian or a power of attorney, it is possible that a parent or grandparent can set it up on their behalf. And typically that parent or grandparent can fund the account. If they have if they're planning to fund the trust with Social Security funds only, so someone's getting a retroactive benefit payment from Social Security, or they have excess income from Social Security disability. If they have a rep payee, the rep payee has the authority to fund on their behalf, but only with Social Security funds. Now, again, that's more rare, but important for some of the people on the line to know that that is an option. If the beneficiary is not able to sign and there is no legal guardian, no power of attorney, no parent or grandparent, then a court order might be required. You may need to petition to the court for permission to establish the trust on their behalf. We put together a very detailed flow chart on what options a person has if they're not able to sign on their own behalf. And I've put a link to that here and also included that in the webinar materials. If you have questions, please contact our office. Now, to get started with establishing a pooled trust with NYSARC Trust Services, the first step is to complete the joinder agreement. And this is the legal document for the trust. You can download the joinder agreement from our website. It's important that you use our website as the resource to get access to this document because it is updated from time to time, and you always want to make sure that you're using the latest document. For example, we have some changes coming soon that are going to streamline our joint agreement even further and make it easier for people to complete this process. And so we encourage you to get on our mailing lists and stay up to date, check our website for updates in the future. You must complete all questions on the joinder agreement. This is vitally important. If you leave a question blank, we won't know if you meant to fill it out or you just forgot. So please, any questions that don't apply to you, just put not applicable. Make sure you complete every question. We're looking for basic demographic information about the beneficiary, who's the person receiving services. What's their name? Where do they live? What is their qualifying disability? Make sure that you complete all pages of that document. It does not necessarily require an attorney to fill out. However, we do always encourage people to work with a legal professional anytime you're considering setting up a trust. This is a legal arrangement, but you do not necessarily need to hire an attorney to complete this document. Our team is happy to assist you and guide you in filling out the questions and answering any questions that you have. It must be signed by the beneficiary or the donor in the example of our third-party programs. And at this time, we do require that it's notarized. If the beneficiary is signing on their own behalf, in some instances, we may ask for a letter of capacity from the provider that may be working with them, just so that we understand that the individual does have the capacity to sign that document. If the joinder agreement is being signed by someone other than the beneficiary, it's important that you provide additional documentation. If it's being signed by a power of attorney or guardian, we're going to need to see copies of those documents, as well as a court order if the trust is being established by a court order. Again, anytime you have questions about filling out this document, please don't hesitate to contact our office. Now, some of the common questions we get when people are filling out the joinder agreement. A lot of people want to know who the beneficiary is. Who am I supposed to put in that first question? The beneficiary is the person who's receiving services or the person who's applying for the Medicaid services or receiving SSI. So that's the individual who is going to benefit from the funds in the trust. The donor is the person funding the trust. So the beneficiary may also be the donor if it's a first-party trust because they're funding it with their own money, which makes them the beneficiary and the donor. For our third-party community trust program, the donor is going to be the person or entity or trust that is establishing and funding that trust for the benefit of the individual who's receiving Medicaid or supplemental security income benefits. When you're completing the joinder agreement, please be sure that the name that you provide on the joinder agreement matches the legal documents that you're submitting, like your Social Security card and your Social Security award letter. Some people might be using maiden names still, or have other names legally on their documents. It's important that those match. So please be sure that you do that. Otherwise, we're going to need to follow up and we may need to get additional documentation. The qualifying disability is required. This is one of the questions that is most frequently left blank. The pooled trust does not require any proof of your disability. That is going to be something that you work with the local Department of Social Services or HRA to provide proof or do a disability determination. The trust is simply asking you to disclose what your qualifying disability is that makes you eligible to use a pooled trust. It can be a variety of things. For older adults, they might not necessarily consider themselves to be disabled, but the types of things that you could put there would be things like disabling chronic conditions, COPD, hypertension, heart failure, mobility issues, Alzheimer's, dementia. There are many examples. So please be sure that you complete that question. And if you have any questions, contact our office. We also require that you name at least one authorized contact on the account who can submit requests on your behalf. And that's to ensure that you have someone that you trust who can send bills to the trust if you are ever unable to do so. That is a requirement, so please make sure that you put at least one contact on the account. If you don't have someone to put in that place, contact your office and we'll work with you. We ask you later on in the document to tell us who is going to be the primary contact who's managing the account, who's going to be the person that needs to receive the forms to send money to the trust and to send requests to pay for bills. We provide a welcome packet to that individual after we have established the account with all of the forms you need to manage your account. So make sure that you put the primary contact who will be managing the trust for that question. And it's also important, the final step to completing this process is that we need to provide these documents to Medicaid or the Social Security Administration to show proof that you're using a pooled trust to either pay your monthly Medicaid spend down or that you have properly protected any assets that needed to be spent down for benefit eligibility purposes. So the representative is going to be the person who you are authorizing to submit those documents on your behalf. NYSARC does not have the authority to speak to Medicaid on your behalf. So we're going to need to name someone that we send those documents to, and that person is required to submit them to Medicaid or the Social Security Administration, whatever agencies as applicable for your needs. The signature page is another page that's really important that it's completed correctly. This is something that can absolutely delay someone opening the trust if this is not completed and filled out correctly. When you are signing the trust, if it's the beneficiary signing on their own behalf, the relationship to the beneficiary is self. They are signing for themselves. If there is someone other than the beneficiary signing, you need to be sure that you provide your relationship to the beneficiary is what gives you the authority to sign on their behalf. If you are signing for your mom, you're not signing as their daughter or their son, you're signing as their power of attorney, or you're signing as a person's legal guardian. Or in some cases, it may be a parent or a grandparent for a younger individual that has a disability and maybe funding the trust with a lump sum of assets. So really important, relationship to beneficiary is what gives you the authority to sign on this person's behalf. It does need to be notarized and the signature dates must match. If the person signed on a different date than it was notarized, that tells us that the notary did not actually witness that person signing. So very important that the dates of the notary and the signature match, and that the notary stamp is legible and active. The notary should not be expired, okay? Those are things you can check and make sure that everything is in good order before submitting it to the trust. Somebody asked if the beneficiary has the full legal capacity and doesn't need a guardian or rep payee to establish the account on their behalf, can they still designate a representative to speak to Medicaid on their behalf for the NYSARC Trust? Yes, the answer to that is absolutely. You can name whomever you would like who's going to submit those documents on your behalf. Now, you may need to communicate to Medicaid who that person is because that person may need to be added to your Medicaid case so that HRA or your DSS office will speak with them. But generally, we're sending the documents by fax or email to someone, so that's something that most individuals would be able to do on a person's behalf. And you just want to make sure that you provide identifying information for that person so they know who it's for. And this is more rare, but worth mentioning if a power of attorney is signing on behalf of an individual, and that power of attorney was executed before September of 2010, they must provide an affidavit of full force and effect in addition to a copy of their power of attorney paperwork. Now, we've completed step one. We have filled out all the questions on the joinder agreement. We have properly signed and notarized that document. The next step is get together the supporting documentation that's required. The individual needs to get us a copy of their Social Security card. We understand in some cases people may not have a copy of their Social Security card. So we could use another government issued document that may have the Social Security number on it. It's important that we have something so that we can verify this individual's Social Security number with their name. That is vitally important to our ability to open up a bank account on this person's behalf. If you have somebody who does not have a copy of their Social Security card, contact us and we will work with you to see what other options we can to meet that requirement. We need a copy of their Social Security benefit award letter, or if the individual has an SSA 1099 form, that gives us everything that we need. You can submit that and we don't need to get a copy of the Social Security card. If somebody needs to get another copy of these documents, they can do that on the Social Security website or by calling the toll-free number on the screen. We have instructions and a resource on our website showing people how to request that. So again, encourage you to use that Join the Trust page on our website and refer to that information if you have questions. If someone other than the beneficiary is signing, we must get documents that substantiate your authority to sign on their behalf. So copy of your power of attorney, letters of guardianship if you're signing as a guardian, and a court order if the trust is being established by court order. So now we have the joinder agreement complete, signed and notarized. We've got our supporting documents attached. And the next step is to fund the trust. Now, typically, it's going to be a minimum of $300 for our Community Trust 1 and 2 programs, and maybe higher for some of our other programs. Again, refer you to the current fee schedule for those programs or the chart I presented at the beginning of today's training. So the first and simplest way to fund the trust is with a one-time electronic deposit from your bank account. You can download a copy of the electronic deposit form from our website and complete section B, which is to make a one-time electronic deposit. If you already know what your monthly spend down is going to be and you're ready to start setting it up for monthly recurring deposits, you can fill out section A and set up your monthly deposits to start. We need a copy of a voided check from your bank account. That's what we use to verify your bank account and routing number. And if you're making deposits from a savings account where you might not have a check, send us a bank letter that verifies your account number and routing number. You can email this form with your joinder agreement and supporting documents to intake@nysarc.org, or you can send everything by fax. If you'd like to fund the trust by check, we need to get a check for a minimum of $300, complete a new account deposit slip. Again, this is available for download from our website, and make the check payable to NYSARC Community Trust for the benefit of the beneficiary's name. If you're receiving a check from a life insurance policy, for example, you may already have a check in hand. So you can simply endorse that check over to NYSARC Community Trust for the benefit of the beneficiary's name. It's very important that you mail the check separately from any other documents that you're submitting to the trust. The check goes straight to the bank. And so that address is listed on the new account deposit slip. And we encourage you, please include a deposit slip with the check so we can make sure we know whose account to assign it to. And do not send any other documents to this location. This is a bank lockbox. It accepts only checks. So if you submit your joinder agreement and supporting documents to this address, it will delay us receiving that information. So if you're paying by check, you're going to submit your joinder agreement and supporting documents either by the email or the fax, or you can even mail, and you send the check separately in the mail to the address that is listed on the new account deposit slip. Step 4, this is the most important step. After we have reviewed the documents and approved the account, you need to be sure that you submit the executed documents. Oh, I'm sorry. Step 4, we're going to send everything to NYSARC Trust Services. So again, just to summarize, your complete joinder agreement notarized, all your supporting documents, and the funding for the trust, either the electronic deposit form with the voided check or a check with a new account deposit slip that you're going to mail separately to a bank lockbox. If you are missing any documentation, it will delay processing. You can send these documents to NYSARC in a variety of ways, by email, fax, or mail. And as we've discussed, make sure checks are sent separately to that bank lockbox. It'll take us about 5 business days to review everything. And once it's approved, that's when you're going to move forward with sending the documents to the appropriate agencies, depending on what benefits you receive. This is an important final step to show proof of your participation in the trust. For example, if you are spending down income for Medicaid purposes and you don't inform Medicaid that you're sending your spend down to a pooled trust, you might start to get letters from your managed long-term care plan, or DSS might not activate your Medicaid because they're not aware that you're paying your spend down to a trust. So be sure that you submit these documents in a timely manner. And if you need assistance with this, contact our office. Provide us with the fax number or email of where they need to be sent to Medicaid, and we can send them on your behalf, along with a verification of your deposit. Sometimes they want to make sure that they have confirmation that you've made your first deposit. The next steps will be for our team to contact you, go over the procedures for the trust via welcome call. So this is how we ensure a smooth transition into the trust, okay? We're going to provide a folder in the mail to that primary contact that you named on the joinder agreement. Once you have time to receive that folder, we will follow up with you to go over those forms, walk you through the next steps of how you start to use the funds in your account. We'll review all the contents of that packet and go over things that you may want to use the trust to pay for, what are the required documents for those requests, what forms you need to make requests to the trust, and answer any other questions that you have. We encourage you, now that the account is set up, to log into our online portal and get signed up so that you can check your balance, manage, download forms you need to manage the account. You can access copies of your joinder agreement and your acceptance letter to submit those documents to Medicaid. You can do that immediately upon acceptance into the trust. And you can also use that tool to manage, track when disbursements are received by NYSARC Trust Services and when things go out for payment. And at this time, we're currently piloting the ability to upload your disbursement request through the online portal. So this is a great tool that's going to allow you to manage the account at your own convenience 24/7. You can also call our office and speak to our customer service team to get information about your account, and we will answer any questions you have. And in order to access our automated phone system, you simply dial 8 when you hear the message on the phone, enter your 6-digit account code and your 4-digit PIN, which is generally the last 4 digits of the beneficiary's social security number, and you'll be able to listen to a recording of your most recent transactions and check your balance. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to contact our office. Our customer service team is available on weekdays from 8:30 to 5. We're here to assist you, guide you in getting you started in the trust. it often does take a couple of months to get things up and running and have things running smoothly, depending on your situation. In some cases, if you're putting a lump sum deposit into the trust, you may not be ready to use any money in the account right away, but we are always available to answer questions that you have. That concludes today's training. We do encourage you to take some time to sign up if you haven't already for part 3 of this series, where we'll be discussing what a trust can pay for. We really broke these sessions up into 1-hour segments because there is so much to talk about for each one. So we're excited to be able to take a deep dive next month on November 16th. We'll be back at our regular time, 11 to 12, and we'll be discussing how you can use the funds in a person's pooled trust to pay people's bills, as well as make purchases of items and services that can improve a person's quality of life. We'll talk about specific documentation requirements and ways to effectively use the funds in a person's trust.